development at this scale means at a human level. Here in India, you've gone from only the very few in rural areas having a water or power connection to almost everyone. And that means that people have better health and education outcomes, and that in turn creates hope and optimism about the future for individuals and their families. Replicated across literally hundreds of millions of people, that process of development generates dynamic economies. Growth that offers massive opportunities for every country in the Indo-Pacific region and the families and the individuals within them. Now, the second big opportunity is technological change. We are on the cusp of a transformation of our economies and societies in a way that we can barely now imagine. I'm talking about artificial intelligence, which is within reach of achieving the cognitive powers of a human being. But I'm also thinking of a range of other technologies, quantum, biotech, advanced manufacturing, that are going to have profound impacts on our economies. And it has felt like this technological transformation has been long heralded, but never quite arrived. Well, it seems to me that a series of innovations, the always online world, big data, powerful computing, machine learning, accumulating in ways that are going to tip over into a dislocation that is new and altogether different. The game is about to change because we are on the cusp of an explosion in the application of AI. A technology that will have an impact across the whole economy, not just in one or two sectors. A technology that will transform the way that we work, the way that we study, and the way that we entertain ourselves. A technology that will force governments to think in entirely different ways about how they deliver public services and secure their nations. And certainly this presents risks that will need to be managed. For example, militaries are already using AI, which means the international community is going to need to develop new norms about how this is done in a way that ensures compliance with the rules of war and also ensures human responsibility in conflict. But my message is that while we need to manage that change, we cannot allow ourselves to be paralysed by the risks. For those who believe that they can outcompete through this period of technological disruption and dislocation, the opportunities are there. The citizens, the companies, and the countries that embrace the coming change will be the ones that reap the dividends. Yet there's also no doubt that there are fundamental trend lines in the Indo-Pacific that present geostrategic risks to both growth and prosperity. And these have long-term drivers that are not going away and have been amplified by recent events. Past assumptions that underpin the previous generation's geopolitical calculations are being totally upended. A fortnight ago, the Singaporean Foreign Minister, Vivian Balakrishnan, put this change very eloquently when he said, "The world is now shifting from unipolarity to multipolarity, from free trade to protectionism, from multilateralism to unilateralism, from globalization to hypernationalism, from openness to xenophobia, and from optimism to anxiety." This is a global change, not isolated to one region. And certainly though we live today in an Indo-Pacific navigating contest and rivalry with a period of strategic uncertainty, I think there are three big shifts that make for challenging times for all of us ahead. The first is that we are seeing rules giving way to power. Previously, we could count on countries respecting the UN Charter, the law of the sea, and world trade rules. That sadly cannot be assumed in an age of sharper competition. And instead, we risk dangerous miscalculation at flashpoints, and these range from the militarisation of disputed reefs to dangerous air movements, from land border incursions to breakout nuclear capabilities. And of course, it's not just flashpoints, but a slow shift in Indo-Pacific realities that change calculations. Recent demonstrations of naval force near New Zealand's maritime surrounds, for example, sent a signal that alarmed many of my fellow citizens. Second, we are witnessing a shift from economics to security. Because after the Cold War, the dominant paradigm in relations between Indo-Pacific countries was a sustained effort to raise the material living standards by tending to our economies. And make no mistake, bread and butter issues still loom very, very large and are a priority for governments all around the region. And indeed, economic growth is my government's highest priority too. But across the Indo-Pacific, we also see governments dedicating increased attention and resource to military modernisation. Military build-ups reflect a need to prepare against uncertainty and against insecurity. And some military build-ups, however, are underway without the reassurance that transparency brings. National security demands are expanding. Governments need to protect their people and assets against foreign interference, cyber attacks and terrorism. In the last few months, a new threat has emerged with damage to critical infrastructure like subsea cables. Well, you can't have prosperity without security, not least when the tools of commerce themselves require protection. The third big geo-economic shift, as I see it, is from efficiency to resilience. Where previously Indo-Pacific economies saw even deeper interdependence as a dynamo for growth, that can no longer be assumed in an age of decoupling. Onshoring, protectionism and trade wars are displacing best price, open markets and integrated supply chains. And so we find ourselves in a world that is growing more difficult and more complex, and especially so for smaller states. However, we must engage with the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. And so, like most countries across the region, New Zealand's strategic policy is being shaped by our assessment of these trends. We have agency to shape the Indo-Pacific that we all want, but we must do so with energy and with urgency. Ladies and gentlemen, as New Zealand looks to protect and advance our interests in the Indo-Pacific, we can only do so alongside partners like India that have a significant role to play in the Indo-Pacific region. In an increasingly multipolar world, India's size and geostrategic heft gives you autonomy. And at the same time, your democratic partners in the Indo-Pacific offer you a force multiplier for our convergent interests. For at a time when democracy is in decline with less than half the world's adults electing their leaders, it truly is an inspiration that 650 million Indians turned out to vote last year in the largest election in history. Your national election is a triumph of logistics, but it's also a triumph of legitimacy. An election that means your leaders serve their people rather than your people serving their leaders. Now, I don't advocate arbitrary divisions between democracies and autocracies, and just because we are democracies, we won't always see eye to eye. Nonetheless, there's truth in the fact that our democratic governance means that we share a belief in the freedom to choose, giving everyone a voice and respect for the rules. Our interests increasingly converge around seeing three ideas as an aligned set of organising principles for our Indo-Pacific region. And the first is that we want to live in an Indo-Pacific where countries are free to choose their own path, free from interference. A region where no one country comes to dominate. And it is a sign of the times that I have to stand here defending respect for sovereignty, yet New Zealand's approach is increasingly shaped around that objective. Just on Saturday, I joined a call led by Prime Minister Starmer focused on what more those contributing to Ukraine's defence can do to support a just and lasting peace, to help a country whose sovereignty and territorial integrity has been so flagrantly attacked. And in my own home region, our fellow Pacific neighbours are navigating geostrategic dynamics that are their sharpest in nearly 80 years. And in a deeply contested world, Pacific partners are being asked to make choices that may undermine their national sovereignty. They risk falling into over-indebtedness. They must make choices about dual-use infrastructure, and they face pressure to enter new security arrangements. New Zealand invests in working alongside Pacific countries to boost their capacity to make independent choices free from interference. Yet size alone cannot inoculate a country from these dynamics. Building strong and diversified relationships is the key to mitigating the risk of dependence on a few. And that is why my government is investing in our key relationships, from traditional partners to thickening and deepening our relationships across Southeast Asia, and in a serious way with India too.